Hello and welcome to another manager special Funny Honest Football podcast. I swear we're going to do at least 20 clubs this season. Today we're talking about West Brom and the sacking of Steve Bruce and the hiring of Carlos Corberan as a new head coach. A statement from West Bromwich Albion is short and sweet. Very good to hear. Obviously, they're delighted to hire Carlos Corberan as a new head coach. The 39-year-old has signed a 2.5-year contract and will take his first training session on Wednesday. His backroom staff, which will include James Morrison and Gary Walsh, will be finalised in due course. Ron Gourlay, the chief executive, said Carlos is a coach of the highest quality, and I am delighted to welcome him to the club. Carlos was in our thoughts from the very beginning of the recruitment process, and our admiration of his qualities only grew on meeting him. He's a confident, enthusiastic, and a detailed coach who's determined, as I am, to bring success to the Hawthorns. We share a belief that performances and results will improve under his guidance. Significant time remains in the season for us to mount a serious assault on the Championship League table. So let's start with the previous man, Steve Bruce. Started in February, left in October. 32 played, 8 wins, 12 draws, and 12 defeats. 25% win percentage. It was boring under Steve Bruce.
Yeah, and the writing had been on the wall for a few weeks. I mentioned it on the predictions every week. The first few games of the season, they actually played quite well without getting a result over the line. Had a lot of chances, were a little bit wasteful in front of goal. Obviously had problems with injuries to strikers at times as well. But overall, it didn't work out. Far too many draws. And in the last 5 or 6 games, you just got to that position where the fans turned, they got against him, and it was never coming back from that point. A lot of goals conceded. And I mentioned it in recruitment. They didn't make too many changes to the defence in the summer, which perhaps was a mistake. But overall, the players they added are very good. So they could be in a good position for Carlos Corberan now. But yeah, there was no surprises, let's be honest. After 5 or 6 games, we knew it was starting to come, and it was inevitable. It was just when rather than if at some point.
It was never a perfect fit from the start with, and you have to blame Ron Gourlay on that.
Yeah, well, we sort of said it, didn't we, under Bruce when he came in to start with to replace Ishmael. The Ishmael sacking was, I know they were having a poor run, but again, it was that little bit of a panic. They weren't far off the playoffs still. And Steve Bruce was brought in as that quick fix. The man with 4 championship promotions, maybe he can sneak us into the playoffs. I was actually quite surprised when they fell away towards the end of the year that he actually stayed on. But despite the good signings, they haven't really picked up. And when you consider they've added some of probably the best and most efficient attacking championship midfielders over recent seasons, to not really have a return from it at all is properly surprising. And maybe the shackles were on a little bit. They haven't hugely improved since Bruce left. We do have to say that so far. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens under Corberan. But as you say, Ron Gourlay, when it comes to January, is going to have to back him and going to have to let him make the signings, because whatever's been happening in the last year and a half, 2 years, it hasn't been working.
That leads perfectly to the new man in charge, Carlos Corberan. He was at Huddersfield last season. Obviously, he had a brief stint at Olympiacos and didn't last long like a Watford manager. He done very well last season. He took Huddersfield to the playoff final, only lost 1-0 to Nottingham Forest. First question I have to ask you is, when it does come to January, does he look at a couple of Huddersfield players?
Maybe, but as we mentioned, Huddersfield have lost over half of that 11 that played in the Wembley final, so there's not many of them left for him to go for. But I got a different first thought. My first thought when this appointment was made was, take out the 11 games at Olympiacos. Take that out. How similar is this appointment to the Valerian Ismail one? It's so similar on paper. You've got a manager who came in. Yes, he had the extra year building them at the bottom half of the championship, but had a brilliant run into the playoffs unexpectedly with a disciplined team who were very good defensively, played well on the counter off a single front man. And then when it came round to it, he came to West Brom, started well, and it fell away. That's my initial thought. It's the first thing that came into my head. I'm not saying it's going to be like that. I think Corberan is more proven in his time at Huddersfield over a longer period and generally had a better record in his previous job as well. But it is a worry and it is a similarity. And I do wonder if from the club point of view, are they maybe looking at the same routes every time? You go from the experienced proven manager, you've seen the likes of Bruce and Allardyce and the likes they've had in recent years, Tony Pulis even going back a bit further. And then you've got the likes of Ishmael and now Corberan, who are very similar in stature. So that was the first thing that came to my head, but hopefully for West Brom, it will work out differently.
Well, you said earlier about backing him. Corberan didn't get the backing in the summer from Huddersfield. Do you actually see that in January?
They have to. That's the only reason he would come in is if they've had that discussion. And you've got to look at it with the World Cup now. There's 5 games before it and then a couple after before the window opens. So if he can get the right players in, if they can work on that during the month off, they could potentially have half a season with his squad to work with. And let's be fair as well, they don't need masses, West Brom. They've signed some very good players in the summer. There's a reason we both predicted them in the playoffs on the strength of the likes of Jed Wallace, John Swift, who I'm a big fan of coming into the club. They've got Carlin Grant, who was one of their few shining lights last year. Daryl DK, when fit and firing, we know is a top championship striker. They have got players of the highest order. My priority, and I think Carlos Corberan's priority, will be defensively, because that's what his Huddersfield side were built on. He saw what happened in the first season there. He added new defenders the second season, and it was a revelation. They were disciplined, they were structured, and they nicked goals. And that's what they're going to have to work on, because I'm sorry, that defence at West Brom is not really changed too much, particularly in the middle, since they went up to the Premier League last time. And they've been poor ever since. So for me, getting in a disciplined and a very commanding centre-half is going to be number 1 in January, and then very closely followed by a goalkeeper.
Yeah, because, well, to be honest, Button is not the ideal replacement from Sam Johnson and obviously Alex Palmer.
But they didn't buy anyone, did they? They just upgraded the number 2 and 3.
Yeah, they didn't really get replacement. You could, I said, like, when you look at a couple of Huddersfield players, Lee Nichols has had a fantastic season last season. To be honest, the 2 players I actually would look at is Sorba Thomas and Lee Nichols. That's the only 2 I could probably say he might go for in January. But let's look at the next few games. Sheffield United first on Saturday, and then Blackpool at home, QPR away, and Stoke at home. So it's a real mixed bag for West Brom.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the next 3 games are quite tricky. I know Blackpool, maybe at the start of the season, they would expect to win that, but Blackpool have been good at times this year. Sheffield United and QPR are hard games. We know that. But maybe that's the ideal time to have a new manager bounce. You look at after that, until the January window opens, or until after the FA Cup 3rd round, you've got Sunderland, Rotherham, Coventry, Bristol City, Preston, Reading. All sides that either finished in the bottom half or got promoted last year or are in the bottom half now. So you've not got any of those sides who you would say on paper are massive promotion contenders. And that is going to be a key spell for Corberan. If he can build momentum and if he can set that defence up to stop shipping goals, I don't think it's going to be exciting for West Brom fans the next couple of months. He's got to work with what he's got. And a bit like Southgate with England in the recent tournaments, he's got to protect that defence because the defence will get caught out if it's exposed. So I think till January, you're going to see a very, very cautious side. What we've seen traditionally with Huddersfield, 4 with the 2 in front of them, and then just 4 players going forward in attack. And let's be fair, at West Brom, those 4 should be good enough. You've got Wallace, you've got Swift, you've got one of the 2 strikers. It could even be DK and Grant. You've got a really good attacking base there. So I think West Brom are going to play on the counter for the next couple of months. I think they've got a good chance of picking up a lot of results. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because all those sides down there, bar Coventry, who have got games in hand, have got a new manager now.
Yeah, they do. And how do you see West Brom pan out for the rest of the season?
Pretty uninspiring, if I'm being honest. I think it will be uneventful. I think they'll get out of trouble, no problem. But I can't see them making that assault on the playoffs. And I know, look, there's always one team that surprises. You had Forest last year. You had Barnsley the year before. Huddersfield even to an extent last year alongside Luton with Corberan. So there's always one surprise, but I'm not sure West Brom are going to be it this year. I think they'll get out of trouble, which is their main thing. But look at what Corberan did before at Huddersfield. He took a year to get used to the squad, knew exactly what problems needed to be solved. And when he was back the first summer at Huddersfield, he found those solutions. The issue is, if West Brom don't back him, either in January or in the summer, we know he'll walk because he did that at Huddersfield after a side that got to the playoff final. I do think they'll be all right. They'll be mid-table. I don't see them getting in the playoffs now, but the whole championship table's basically separated by 15 points. So who bloody knows at this point? But yeah, I think they'll be all right this season. Next year is going to be the very big test.
So last question from me is, do you think he'll see out his contract 2.5 years?
Well, the championship tells you no, because most managers don't. And I think Nathan Jones is now the 3rd or 4th highest serving manager, the Luton one, and he's been back, 2 and a bit years now. So let's not say yes, because that's unlikely for a 2.5 year deal. But I do think he'll see out this season, and I do think he'll get a proper good go next year. I actually think West Brom will probably be up there. And next year, that's going to be important for him because I don't think he'll keep his job. If not, they are a side that expect to be in that top six every year they're in Championship. And while this season he might get a pass because of their position, I still think next year it's going to be an expectation. I'm not convinced whether he takes them up next year. It depends on the team and the players he gets in, and obviously who comes down from the Premier League. But I certainly think he'll see out the first 1.5 years. Whether he'll get to the end, I'm not so sure.
No, I'm in the same category, really, of it's very hard for a manager to stay the whole season. Whereas I don't trust Ron Gourlay to help Carlos Corberan out. And I could see him getting frustrated. If a couple of results don't go their way, I could see him biting the bullet and go, nah, it's not working, and see you later. But I have to trust Corberan's philosophy. That's what excited him to approach Corberan, then go, obviously, stick by it. It wasn't a fluke for Huddersfield to get into the playoffs last season. They were excellent throughout the season. They were in the top three. You have to say, okay, trust him. He was under Bielsa, so he can play that little bit exciting football as well. And I think that's what West Brom fans want. They want to see some exciting football because it wasn't exciting under Steve Bruce. The record proves it. It was utterly boring to watch. Ishmael was okay at times. And then obviously Bilic, it was all right under Bilic.
Yeah. And
we thought that sacking was a bit harsh.
Very.
So I can't see him lasting 2.5 years. And that's not because of Corberan's fault. I just upstairs are too stubborn to say, right, this change is not really working. See you later. But he's good. I think it's a good appointment because he's probably the best man out there that's available. Thanks to Dyche.
West Brom just can't expect miracles straight away. With the current squad he's got to protect the defence, and the exciting football probably has to wait.
Yeah, right. You can't expect miracles in the Championship. Like Forest was a miracle last season. Let's be brutally honest. No one expected to be bottom after 5-6 games, and then within a whisker of getting promoted by automatics, and then win the playoffs. So I don't think you'll see that again. But I can't see West Brom being exciting this season. There's too many good, better teams out there at the moment for West Brom to actually be pushing for the playoffs. But that is our reaction to the sacking of Steve Bruce and the hiring of Carlos Corberan at West Bromwich Albion. Do you agree with our thoughts? Disagree with our thoughts? Let us know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the Honest Football Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Honest Football Theory. We'll be back for more predictions later in the week. And we'll see you next time.